Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Hello and welcome back, adventurers. Today I'm going to try something I've never done before, and that's look at and review an ancestry. But not just any ancestry, of course. Our newest ancestry, the Jotunborn. I'll leave out the narrative aspects as I focus on the mechanical, but I will say I really do appreciate the narrative part of this now they fit into the world. So just a cool thing you'll get when you get to the book itself. Having never done this before, we'll see how this version works. It'll be similar, I hope, to my class guides, with a little bit of a different angle. But with that, let's go ahead and jump into the basics of the ancestry. First of all, we have the fact that it is rare. So make sure to check with your GM if you're a player and GMs. There's nothing in here that I think couldn't fit into a game mechanically, so probably isn't an issue, but just keep it in mind. Then we get 10 hit points per level, which puts it at the higher end, right? There are others that get 10, but that's pretty much where we cap off for ancestries, meaning you have a nice hardy character. You are large size, which is one of only few, right? This is a more recent trend that they've allowed some large size. We do, of course, have them, like the Minotaur and certain awakened animals, things like that. Our movement speed is 25 feet. Pretty basic and standard, right? Nothing surprising there. Our attribute boosts are in strength and wisdom, with, of course, our standard free, whatever you want. There is a flaw, though, because we have the 2 pointed boosts. We have a flaw in charisma. So just keep that in mind for builds and things you might want to avoid. And finally, we have languages, pretty standard stuff here, Common, Jotun, and more equal tier in mod, assuming it's positive. Then we have the features that all Jotunborn get, starting with Evlar weaving, IIV. Anyway, this is a type of thread woven into your skin. It allows you to glow, creating dim light in a 10-foot emanation around yourself. You can use a sustain action to suspend it or turn it back on or change its color, but otherwise normally it'll just be on or off, however you've got it generally set up for yourself. The other feature is low light vision. This means that you can see in dim light as if it were bright light, and nothing is concealed to you simply because they're in dim light, which combined with the fact that we create dim light is a nice kind of 1-2 punch for setting up your character in that way. Now that we do have the basics down though, I'm going to walk through every heritage, followed by all of the feats. I'm going to try another new approach, and this is something that somebody brought up in one of my comments. They were wondering if I would rank the feats. So with that in mind, for both the heritages and the feats, I'm going to rank them from 1 to 4 stars. The reason for 1 to 4, by the way, is because it doesn't give me an easy out at a midpoint with a 3. I really have to choose higher or lower. I like to kind of force myself in that way. I know it's different from what I do with the S to D, where there is a middle ground with that B. I don't want to give myself the easy out this time. Having said that, what do the stars actually mean? Well, a 4-star heritage or feat, to me, needs to be fairly unique. It could be valuable for a wide variety of classes and builds, and it's something that you will regularly get value from or regularly want to use when it's available to you. As usual, I'll give more of an edge to features and feats that are useful in combat, because that's the focus of still most campaigns, and at least that's where the stakes are higher, even if that's not what you're doing the most of the time. While a 1-star, conversely, is a heritage or feat that is very generic, easily forgotten, and may just never be useful. It could even be a trap or a trick that makes you think it's going to be really valuable, that when we break it down, even if you were to ever use it, really isn't going to be useful in any real situation it would come up, meaning that you're stuck with a disappointing feature or feat. Okay, hopefully that's enough setup. Tell me if you want more. Let's dive into the heritages, starting with the Keeper Jotunborn. You become trained in survival, and you gain Survey Wildlife, which is a skill feat for survival. You also get a +1 to track animals. Getting a skill proficiency and feat isn't anything unique in itself, but you are at least building on one of your attribute boosts, right? You do get a wisdom boost there. How often tracking animals comes up will be entirely campaign-based, so it could have 0 value. I don't think this is amazing. It's not blowing me away, so I'm going to give it 2 stars. Not bad, but nothing surprising or interesting. Plain Hopper Jotunborn. You are medium instead of large, so you're downsizing yourself. You gain 1 occult cantrip. Gaining spells, even cantrips, is generally speaking good, though not unique. Unfortunately, these are innate spells, which means that they use charisma for your spellcasting, which of course you have a flaw in. So that's not going to help anything. But because they're cantrips, and we do have cantrips that don't rely on your spellcasting ability at all, and these are occult spells, which means it's got a pretty good set to pull from, you could choose something like Shield or Guidance and still have a really solid ability to use whenever you need it that you can take full advantage of. And sometimes being medium instead of large is itself a bonus for you. So these things together, again, nothing unique here, but an interesting combination of things. I'm going to give this 3-star, but that really keeps in mind that it's a 3-star if you're going to choose a cantrip that doesn't rely on your spellcasting ability. Say Jotunborn. You become trained in society, and you gain the additional lore feat, which lets you choose a lore to have proficiency in. Getting a skill proficiency with no tied feat is just not a whole lot. And then additional lore, it can be interesting because it does increase proficiency on its own in that lore, which I do like. So I like having that because I do think recall knowledge should be used a lot. But keep in mind when you're choosing a lore, it's usually easier to identify something if you have a lore that fits, but then you have to have a specific lore that fits. So if you have a campaign where your GM is pretty clear that you're mostly dealing with something of X type or for X reason where you can choose a lore that's going to be fitting, this could be fantastic, but you could easily grab a lore that you never use, and then you just have society, and that would be extremely disappointing. So tread carefully here. I think this is 2 stars. I think they could have still given something tighter related to society and had additional lore or something. Warrior Jotunborn. Your fist is now a D6 rather than a D4 weapon. It's not really a weapon, just your strikes are D6s instead of D4s. Also, your strikes don't take a penalty for making lethal attacks anymore. So you can attack in the same way that a monk can with their fist as far as being lethal with it. So this is at least somewhat unique as far as heritages go. You don't see something like this pop up a ton. Is it any good? Well, I think it can be. This is useless in cases where you're never going to want to be up hitting anybody in melee, or if you're going to very explicitly always be leaning into weapons, like even if your weapon were to be taken from you, you'd have another weapon to pull out, then no. But it's not bad. It's good for grapple builds, and there's plenty of situations where you might want to use an unarmed strike because, again, you've lost access to a weapon, disarming, whatever it may be. So I tilted between 2 and 3 stars on this one. I'm going to give 3. I'm going to give the edge of a 3 just because it's slightly unique, and I do like that. You won't find it on, every single ancestry out there, but I don't think it's blowing anybody's mind here. Like, it's still just, it's fine. And finally, Weaver Jotunborn. You become trained in crafting. You get a +1 bonus to seek hidden details in the environment around you. Crafting is good and slightly better than society and survival in my personal opinion. That's personal. But not enough to make an actual difference here. If the second feature was solid, this would be 3 stars, though, to me still. Instead, the rider with this, the hidden secret stuff, when you're seeking, oh boy, a lot of times that's going to be pretty well useless. I mean, a +1, specifically, you have to be searching for hidden details. Yeah, no, not loving that. This is 2 stars, and it got close to a 1 star, honestly, for me. You're just not going to get anything out of the bonus, I don't think, generally speaking. Instead, it'll be the crafting. GMs, if somebody takes this, try to have something hidden that they can seek once in a while, assuming they didn't forget they had it. Okay, so not the most exciting rankings for the heritages, but there weren't terrible choices either. There's some good stuff in there. Let's dive into the feats and see what we can do about kind of stretching our wings a bit and see if we see any 4-star or 1-star feats in here. I would expect a little more variance once we get into the feats. Something to keep in mind is that when I'm looking at 1 to 4 stars, I'm keeping the level in mind, right? So something that is a 1 star at, say, 17th level would potentially be 4 stars at level 1. So very different between them. And we're starting off with the level 1 feats. Starting with Caretaker's Intuition. Trained in nature, which if you're already trained in nature, you can just choose a different skill to be trained in, not a problem. You can spend 10 minutes outside to get a feel for what the weather's going to be like for the next 8 hours. But you don't get anything specific like, they mentioned like wind speed. So just generally. I'll be honest, as a GM, if somebody had nature and they said, I'd like to stand outside for 10 minutes while everybody else is, doing their 10-minute activity and see if I can figure out what the weather's going to be like today, I'd say, okay, and I'd give them an idea. I think this is extremely weak. Just getting a skill proficiency is nothing for a level 1 feat, in my opinion, and the rider is pretty bad. So we're starting off with a solid 1-star feat, at least to me. Caretaker's Restoration. This is a free action and is once per day. You have to be holding a broken but not yet destroyed item. You repair it to just 1 health above the broken threshold. So if it had, normally 10 would be half, you'd move it to 11. This is another one I don't love. But the very one solid, powerful case here is a shield. If you're using a shield, you're raising it, and then you shield block, and it breaks, but it isn't destroyed, this is a free action. Now, it's only once per day, but it's a free action, which means you can immediately repair it and get its AC boost back. That isn't worthless. It isn't blowing my mind. If it was once an hour, I'd actually maybe like this decently. It'd probably be a 3 stars if it was once per hour, but as once per day, I'm going to give it 2 stars. Not useless, but still not crazy. Jotun's Eyes. You have dark vision. Yep. This is often useful. Takes nothing from you, but you'll get regular value out of it, assuming you're ever in the dark. It's not unique. It's not particularly interesting, but it's good to have. 3 stars. Jotunborn Grappler. You are trained in athletics, or if you already were, you're trained in something else. And you get Titan Wrestler, the skill feat. This is all you really need. Trained in athletics, Titan Wrestler, to start off a grapple build. Gaining both for just 1 general feat at level 1 is actually a great way to kick off a build. And because, we don't have high expectations necessarily for level 1 feats, to me, this is 4 stars. Yes, you can get it other ways, but this combination coming together all right for you at once, that's fantastic. I love it. You can even gain value out of non-grapple builds, right? Anybody who wants to be doing any kind of shoving or tripping and things like that can gain value out of Titan Wrestler. Yeah, solid take. Jotunborn Lore, level 1. All ancestries do get this type of thing, so, dwarf and lore, you get all these things. This is standard. You become trained in occultism and survival, or whatever your choices if you already had them, and you gain additional lore for Jotunborn Lore. This is, again, very standard. I consider it a 2 stars. You're getting 2 skills, which is fine. The lore probably won't come up. The ones you get are, occultism and survival, which are fine. They're not blowing my mind, though. Still not a terrible take. So there you go. Jotunborn Weapon Familiarity. This is another one that you get for all ancestries, right? They all have their, well, not all, but like most ancestries get weapon familiarity. For you, you're going to get familiarity in the Bola, Great Axe, Halberd, Maul, Long Spear, and War Flail. Of these, you treat martial weapons as if they were simple, and advanced weapons as if they were martial. Sometimes this feat falls completely flat, but there are some really great weapons here. The Halberd is a D10 two-hander. It's got reach. Great Axe two-hander with, a D12, so high as you're getting with a weapon. Those, having been martial, are now simple weapons, which means access to way more classes to use them. Then we have the War Flail, which is a very cool D10 two-handed weapon with some great traits, which is advanced, pulling itself down to martial, so now your martial builds can take full advantage of it. The quality of weapons makes this a 3-star for me, where if you have really bad weapons, it could easily be a 1-star. Plain Stepping Dash. This is 1 action, once per day. You stride once without triggering movement-based reactions, most common being like Reactive Strike. You also get a +5 status bonus to your speeds, but only after the initial stride, so on further strides on your turn. And that's just until the start of your next turn, so it's really the rest of the stuff you do this turn. Getting out of harm's way can be difficult at low levels, but then again, at low levels, not many creatures have reactive strikes or things similar to that, so maybe not a huge deal. Once a day feels pretty restrictive for something I don't feel like is overly powerful. Once per hour would have been honestly completely fine, I think, for this out the gate. Still, it is unique and likely will come up from time to time. You'll be really happy you have it when the situation does come up. So I am actually going to give it a 3, but just barely above a 2. Like, it just ekes it out. All right, with level 1 down, we are up to level 5 feats, starting with Call the First Tools. This is 3 actions, again, once per day. You conjure a simple tool, like their examples were, I think, a shovel and a hammer. This lasts until the next daily preparations, as long as you keep it on your person. If you don't have it on your person for a minute, then it'll disappear. At 9th level, this simply becomes once per hour, but you can still only have 1 available at a time. Being able to create what you need at any given time is valuable. But am I giving up a feat for that when it's just a simple tool? If it stayed once per day, not a chance. This is 1 star if it's just once per day always. But it becomes once per hour, okay, I could see it, right? You need something specific for the situation. I could see that actually coming in handy. I think I'll give it 2 stars, and you better be creative when you take it because it's going to take that level of creativity. But I really am giving it a little nudge just for uniqueness because you don't get much like this from other ancestries. Jotun's Battle Stance. This is 1 action. This is a stance you go into. And if you have a 2-handed melee weapon without the reach property, it gains reach. This sounds small. It's like I'm going to a stance just to add reach to a weapon. But it's not small. This is a big deal for 2-handed builds. It means that for you, melee range is farther and you can choose any weapon. Because yes, I could take a reach weapon as a martial build right now, but the number I can choose from is very small and I'm not going to have many traits on them. Adding reach as a trait onto something with amazing traits already can really up what you're capable of doing with these weapons, especially for some of the athletics-based traits that are built into weapons. This can be very strong. I don't want people to sleep on this. And because you're not getting it other places, I'm going to give it 4 stars. There are ways to do things like this. The closest one that comes into my mind is Inventor. But I think for Inventor, even for a modification, I don't even think this is a base modification. I think you have to be higher level. This is actually pretty strong. Jotun's Grasp. 1 action. You have to be expert already in athletics to take it. And then for 1 action, you step and grapple. This is another one that sounds simple, but there's really more here to it than it just immediately sounds like. So yes, it is action compression, which is already generally good. The step doesn't sound amazing, but with the way the combat works in the system, it's not unusual for an enemy to come up, attack you, and then step away, trying not to trigger your reactions, to get just enough distance to make you waste an action. In this case, you're not wasting that action. You've built it into something you already want to do, which is grapple. Now, if you don't want to grapple, if you just want to strike, this isn't great. But on builds that want to grapple, either as a full grapple build or just because you're trying to set something up with an ally, or you've taken maybe a feat here or there that helps with it, this is amazing. Now, I'm not going to call it 4 stars, but it is a solid 3 for me, and I think a lot of melee builds will like it. Planar Resilience. You treat environment temperatures, meaning hot and cold, as 1 less extreme. So if you're worried about that, it can come up in some games. And during daily prep, you choose a resistance either to cold or fire. You get resistance equal to half your level with a minimum of 1. The resistance here is actually pretty solid. Since you get to choose in the morning, it gives you some nice options there, especially if you know what you're going to deal with during the day. And it's a good amount of resistance. And these are fairly common. Cold and fire do come up a fair amount of the time. The environmental piece is more just a simple rider. It could come up. I'm not saying it wouldn't, but I don't know that it's going to be common. So mostly I'm rating this on the resistance you get, but it does help a little bit. 3 stars, I think, for this level. Having resistance is just good, especially when it's to common damage types. And our final level 5 feat here is Pounding Leap. This is 2 actions. You have to be a warrior Jotunborn to take this, which again was the D4 to D6 upgrade on your fist. You strike with your fist, then you high jump or long jump. You count as having done a run up when you get these jumps, because that matters for them. And you can strike an object if there's just one around you instead of striking something else. Normally, you would have to use 2 actions just to make one of these jumps. So this is 2 actions, but you would have already had to do that to do the jump. So adding a strike is actually nice, right? You get the strike in there first. Yes, it has to be with your fist, but that might be okay. Either you're leaning into that, or, you already have a D6 fist punch, so That's actually not bad. The problem is, how often do you want to do this? Not how often do you want to strike, that's probably pretty common. But I doubt you want to strike somebody and dash away, or run up to somebody, strike them, and then leap. That doesn't seem as common. Maybe it will be, but I'm not sure what you're really getting out of this. It's very unique, and the action does have compression, but I just don't see how you're getting great mileage out of this. So I'm going to go with 2 stars. I can see an argument for 3, but I think it's a more specific build that wants to go in, strike somebody, and then jump somewhere random. All right, we are up to level 9. Build the first walls. This is 3 actions, once per day. You cast a modified version of the Wall of Stone spell. There are restrictions here. It does have to be a vertical wall, so you're not making a bridge with it, and it tells you the exact heights and things like that with it, but it is still very much Wall of Stone. Despite being a weaker version, this is a 5th rank spell, which is the rank of spells that people can get at level 9. So your actual casters in the group, which you may be one of, they're getting these at the same time, which it kind of makes this a little bit crazy to me that they're handing it to you, from your ancestry at the same level. The other advantage here, which we talked about spells and the problems with them having a charisma flaw, this one doesn't care about your spell casting. You can have terrible spell casting. This will still work just the same. So that's great. We're getting something that is a really seriously powerful battlefield control tool. Yes, it's once per day, and we can't do as much with it, but you can still block enemies. You can still help protect your allies. You can block off sections of enemies, make it so that they're split so you get to take out part before the others can get to you. This is really amazing to use in a pinch. Yes, once per day is restrictive, but I think meaningfully so. If it was not this restrictive, I'd be concerned, because this is still 4 stars for me. I'd have a hard time not taking this. Evlar's Deflection. This is a reaction. You have to have the Keeper heritage to take it. When you are critically hit by physical damage, you make a DC 17 flat check, and on a success, it becomes a normal hit. I hate these types of feats. You take it thinking you're going to save yourself when the moment is right, but it just doesn't play out like that. This is a 20% chance to take a critical hit down to a normal hit. That's a 20% chance when you use your reaction to maybe reduce the damage. This is a trap. 1 star. Don't take this. By the way, people might bring up, and it's very true, that they've taken things like this and it saved them, but what's not being brought up is the 80% of people who took this, rolled it when it mattered, completely failed, and died anyway, and they just had this feat sitting on their character forever for no good reason. I just don't take it. Jotun's Boost. 2 actions. You have to have 1 hand free and be adjacent to an ally. You toss a willing adjacent ally 25 feet, or 30 if you had 2 hands free at the time. The ally doesn't take fall damage. They don't land prone. If they land in melee range of an enemy, they can make a melee strike as a reaction. And remember, their melee range might be more like 10 feet or something if they have reach. They just have to be in range. I love the flavor here, by the way. You are hurling an ally. Now, they have to be smaller than you in order to do this, but you're large. They probably are smaller than you. And throwing somebody 25 feet, this doesn't trigger reactions, which is awesome. They just get to land where they want to be, and they can use the reaction to make a strike, which if you're tossing a melee combatant, they probably want to do anyway. I was back and forth between 3 and 4 stars here, but you know what? This is so fun. I'm going to lean into 4 purely out of the joy of this. Another really great level 9 feat. It's going to be hard to choose. Plain Step, 2 actions. You gain concealment until the end of your next turn. You can't use this to hide or sneak, but it does mean people have to roll to try to target you. So concealment is a solid condition, right? You have it on yourself, then you force a flat check just to target you with any action. And there's no restriction to its use. 2 actions to set it up is kind of expensive because you're not probably going to do much else on that turn. It does last through your next turn. I think that this is 3 stars because it might have been too good at 1 action. But I do think it's still pretty solid. I can see an argument for it being like a 2-star thing, but it is a really nice defensive feature. So keep it in mind. Just may not be your go-to constantly. All right, we're actually getting through here pretty quick. We're on level 13 with Evlar's Boundary Break. This is once per day. You can cast Flicker at 4th rank. When you sustain it, if you choose to sustain it, you increase the distance that it makes you travel up to 15 feet. So what is Flicker? Well, Flicker is an interesting spell. The resistance it grants, because it grants you resistance to damage, is solid. It's 5 at this level, and it lasts for a whole minute. You don't actually have to sustain it. You can sustain it, and I'll talk about that, but you don't have to for it to run. So it's just a flat resistance, which is good by itself. The sustaining simply causes what happens at the end of turn while you have it running. So at the end of every turn, and if you sustain it, you teleport. Normally it's 10 feet. It'll be 15 when you teleport on your sustain. Here's the problem. The direction of that teleport is random, making this extremely unreliable. It'll be hard for your enemies to pin you down too, but you could go any direction, which means you could go into a really bad direction. This isn't as strong to me as Wall of Stone. That is clearly good every time you use it. This, I'd be a little worried about using, and if I was building a spellcaster, I wouldn't take this spell normally. However, on a ranged character, trying to stay out of melee with enemies, I can certainly see it, and it is some nice resistance. So, while I do worry about it, it is a unique thing to get. It still doesn't care about your spellcasting ability scores. Pretty cool, and especially on non-melee builds, pretty strong. So I'm going to still give it a 3, but be careful. Jotun's Restoration, level 13. You have to have taken the level 1 feat Caretaker's Restoration, which allowed you to mend something, right? We talked about that, getting it above the broken threshold. You can now use that, Caretaker's Restoration, once per hour instead of once per day. Honestly, this probably could have been how it was at the level 1 version, and it wouldn't have been too strong. There's no way I'm using my level 13 Ancestry feat on this. Sorry, I'm just not doing that. 1 star. Plane Hop. 2 actions. You have to have the level 1 feat Plane Stepping Dash. You can now use this once per 10 minutes, not once per day. You teleport rather than stride, but you must end up somewhere you could have gotten with your stride anyway. This is an improvement. The ability to move away from harmful situations is more important by this level. And so the every 10 minutes is actually going to be pretty valuable, because once a combat, being able to essentially teleport is actually really good. The weird thing is it has to be somewhere you could have gotten with your stride anyway, but that's actually not a bad thing. It's still a teleport. You're not going to trigger reactions. It's once per 10 minutes. It's not a spell. Yeah, no, this is 3 stars. I like it. I think this is a solid move up. Smoothing Stomp. This is 2 actions. You stomp to remove difficult terrain and greater difficult terrain in a 30-foot emanation. You also, when you stomp, can try to counteract magical difficult terrain, which is pretty interesting that you can do that, because there are definitely plenty of spells that do that. This effect lasts for 1 minute when you use it. Just how interesting and cool is this? This is truly unique. This could have fallen flat if the area was too small, but the area is pretty big. In fact, it's bigger than it normally would be, because you are large, making the area even larger, because emanations are bigger on creatures that are bigger themselves. Will this come up all the time? No, it's really not going to come up, constantly. Difficult terrain isn't the most common thing, but it happens enough. And when it can just make hazards disappear for you and your team, and again, it does it for the enemies as well, but you care more when it's hindering you guys, that's pretty solid. This is 3 stars. I like this. And we're down to just the level 17 feats left, starting with Jotun's Heart. You have to have Battle Stance to take this. You are now huge. You were large, you are now huge, just all the time. Your general reach is now 10 feet for everything. You gain max hit points equal to your level. Awesome. If you go into Battle Stance, it now works for all weapons, not just for two-handers, and you gain 5 feet of reach for any weapon or unarmed strike while you're in that stance, meaning you have a reach of 15 feet, which is crazy. How much of the battlefield you will threaten at this point? You yourself take up 9 squares, then you have a 15-foot reach with your weapons if you're in the stance, or even just 10 foot. You are threatening so much. Means it is so dangerous to try to move around you. You can hit just about anybody without hardly having to move. The HP increase is always good. So if you're getting attacked more for being gigantic, okay, at least you've got a little more you can take. This is just upside on top of upside. This is like giant barbarian type of stuff that you get, and you just get it as your ancestry. Any melee martial could gain a lot of value out of this. It even affects grapple builds in a great way because, oh boy, all things are within your grapple space now. This is 4 stars, no question. Have fun. This is so good. Jotun's Transposition. This is uncommon, the only uncommon feat we've had in here. This is twice per week. You can cast interplanar teleport on yourself only. You can travel to either the universe, the astral plane, or the fray without special keys, because normally you need special keys to get to these places. And you can still use this to travel anywhere you actually have a key from. This one's hard to rate because access to something like this should probably be a plot hook. As something to just take, this is 1 star. I can't see how it will be of any use, but if it's part of the campaign and you're going to be traveling, and this allows you to travel more than others, but everybody can travel, okay, that could be cool. But I'm rating this as if it's got nothing to do with your campaign, so it's very much a 1 star. Thematic, but probably useless. And finally, Planar Traveler. This is a free action. You have to have Plane Hop, which is the level 13 feat. Once per hour, when your turn begins, you trigger this free action, or you can. Right? Until the end of your turn, all strides are teleports. Still going wherever your strides could have taken you, but they're all teleports. And the only reactions that can trigger at all from movement are ones that trigger based on teleportation. Yes, you could already do 1 teleport every 10 minutes. And you still can. This doesn't override that, right? This is in addition to. So now, once per 10 minutes, you can do 1 teleport. And then once per hour, you can do a whole turn of teleporting. So this is just a whole lot of teleporting. That's kind of an interesting feat chain, and sometimes I don't like those, and sometimes I do. I do like this one. I think this is cool. This is another solid 3. Teleportation's nice, and honestly, it could be good for just about any build, right? It's maybe not mind-blowing, but it's solid, and I like it. 3 stars. And that's all of the feats. Seeing everything it has to offer, there are definitely certain types of builds that I think will gain an incredible amount of value from this. Any melee martial will appreciate what's available here. Even if there are some challenges to getting the best stuff, meaning some feats maybe you won't get as much out of, it's worth it to get to some of the really great stuff. The teleports are another great avenue. Yes, for melee, they're very helpful, but really for your ranged builds and your casters, they can be so great to get you out of dangerous situations that I love them. I love that Jotunborn can really cater to all of these different styles. As far as recommending classes to work, I mean, most of these are going to be straightforward. I think a lot of people are already thinking about. I know that's kind of a cop-out, but there's some obvious ones. And honestly, anybody really could use this, except for charisma-based classes. I probably would stay away because of the flaw. Outside of that, though, I mean, barbarians, a clear winner. You don't need giant instinct anymore if that would be your thing to go to, because you're like, oh, high damage and I can get big. Well, now you can just get big and take whatever you want, like, dragon or spirit. And then you've got exemplars. This is great for their 2-hand builds, helping them threaten way more. They don't have a great way to threaten as many squares. This could be it. And then you've got guardian, right? Right in here, you've got the guardian, which wants to be able to use reactions. This will allow you to use them against so many more things. And I think this is great for inventors who are going with 2-hand weapon builds. And then, of course, there are all your grapple builds. Choose whatever you want as far as your actual class goes. Grapple builds get a ton out of all of this. Not only do they like the size, there's just straight grapple advantages here, and you get a better fist attack. Yeah, all the way around. Grapple builds, perfect fit. I think there's also, though, something very interesting with a commander here who might want to set up like the walls from the level 9 feat or remove difficult terrain. So there's some of this control aspect of the environment that you've got through several of the feats that could be great for a support type character. And one last one I want to mention because I think it's kind of fun. The Gish Animist. There are some feats with the Animist that want it to lean into some melee combat. Given the strength boost here and the wisdom boost here, plus a combination of reach and size increase and teleportation stuff, I think there's a cool way to build all that together into some very interesting sort of Gish play. I hope this look at the Jotunborn was helpful, and please let me know your thoughts since it is the first time I'm doing one of these. I'm going to go ahead and keep on my BATTLECRY train while you try out some new characters with the Jotunborn Ancestry, and as always, adventure on!